There was a feud between a pastor and a choir director. And I know that these are very delicate. Very delicate. I do not want to make Joe mad. But this happened to be in a Southern Baptist church. The first hint of this trouble came when the pastor preached on dedicating oneself to service, and the choir director chose to sing directly after, "I Shall Not Be Moved." Trying to believe that it was coincidence, the pastor put the incident behind him. The next Sunday, the pastor preached on giving. Afterwards, the choir squirmed in their seats as the choir director led them, and Jesus paid it all. By this time, the pastor was growing impatient. But Sunday attendance started to swell as the tension grew public. A huge crowd showed up the next Sunday for a homily on the sin of gossiping. Would you believe that the choir director decided to choose to sing at that point, "I love to tell the story"? There was no turning back at this stage. The following Sunday, the pastor told the congregation that unless something changed, he was going to consider resigning. The entire church gasped when the choir director led them in, "Why not tonight?" Truthfully, no one was surprised when the pastor resigned a week later, saying that it was Jesus who led them to that community, and it was Jesus who was leading him out. The choir director closed the service with, "What a friend we have in Jesus." Adversity, disagreement, conflict, discord. What do you do with those things in your life? How do you respond when you find yourself in a situation where you are in disagreement with someone? Think of a family member or a friend. What happens in your workplace when you find yourself in conflict with a coworker or with a boss? We live, in my opinion, in trying times, and we're entering an election season. If you want to look for discord, you don't have to go very far. There's so much rhetoric in public today that is about disagreement, about conflict, about adversity towards the other. Our church is not immune to this. Our church, these past few months, is using a rhetoric that you and I might find difficult to accept and respond to in good faith. So how do we respond? How do you respond when you find yourself at odds with all the circles in which you travel? Jesus invites us today to shake the dust from your sandals. Jesus invites us to have a free heart, to be able to let go of those things that we can so easily hold on to. Think for a moment in your own lives at those times in which you have found yourself in disagreement. It's so tempting in those moments to hold on to that and to let it turn into bitterness or cynicism. It's easy for me to look in my own life as I review my years to recognize some of those memories that I hold on to resolved or come from those moments of disagreement. Jesus invites us to let those go. And yet it's tempting, right? Those are the things we carry, those hurts that come out of conflict, those disappointments, those expectations that go unfulfilled. Those are the things we can carry in our hearts. To find the freedom that Jesus invites us to today, we are called to remember that we are a part of a bigger picture, that Jesus invites us into a bigger plan. We are called today to remember, first and foremost, that we are called as sons and daughters of God. And with that comes a responsibility, that we are called to be sent into the world. Jesus calls us to be brothers and sisters. Jesus calls us to be friends. Jesus calls us to witness to Jesus' friendship with us in the world around us. Think again for a moment of those challenges that we face and how difficult it is for us sometimes to shake that dust from our sandals, to find the freedom to embrace the other even when we disagree with them. Jesus says, shake that dust. Come and follow me and live as I have called you to live, as my sons and daughters. We are focused, as our second reading invites us to a greater fullness of life. That's where we are called. Now, you and I might feel and find ourselves at times feeling like Amos in our first reading. Amos says very clearly, whoa, 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 whoa. You're sending me to be a prophet? I'm not a prophet. I don't come from the prophet clan. I'm a shepherd. I dress sycamores. I don't know what dressing sycamores is, but I dress sycamores. During my years in this community, I have seen numerous people, myself included, come into this space with the mindset of, I am simply a teacher. I am simply an engineer, a medical student, an intern. I'm simply a student or a husband or a wife. And we can look at our lives through that lens that's narrow and to say, this is what I'm about. But my time in this community, and I'm going to bet your time here as well, resonates with an experience in which that vision expanded, in which the call that we are invited to and the sending forth broadens our imagination to recognize that life is not simply about me, that life is about something much broader. 15 years ago, I sat in these pews, I was a college student, and I began to recognize people around me being called and sent. How many folks do we know in this community who have been sent on service trips to the four corners of the earth to share their experience of Spirit from this community with diverse communities across the globe? How many folks do we know from this community who have taken the Spirit that they've lived here and moved into careers and professions with a vision and understanding of how we are to treat one another, of how we are called to be with one another, of how we are called to create community wherever we find ourselves? I am deeply, deeply grateful for this community. During my time here with you all have the ability to expand my imagination to imagine that I could operate in the world in a way that invites people to the table, invites people to recognize the need for forgiveness in their own lives, invites people to enter deeper commitment into Christ's love. My experience in this community was transformative, and I'll bet all of us can name in different aspects of our own lives how the Spirit of this community continues to transform our commitments in terms of how we spend our time, how we spend our money, what communities we enter. I'm deeply grateful. St. Ignatius, founder of the Jesuits, wrote a book called The Spiritual Exercises. And in that, he talks about how we are called into the vineyard of the Lord, not simply as laborers, but as co-laborers. That this being called and sent is not one in which we take the mantle of being called and sent into the world alone. It is Jesus who walks with us, accompanies us side by side in the work that we're called to do. We are called and we are sent, as our gospel concludes today, with three direct ways into how we can engage this world. That we are called to bring forgiveness into all those places in our hearts, all those relationships around us, and in a world that is deeply broken. We are called to bring forgiveness. We are called, too, to speak truth. Can we be a people who speak truth to all the rhetoric that announces over and over and over exclusivity? We're a world that is in desperate need of Christ's message of inclusion, of welcome, of forgiveness. And finally, our gospel reminds us that we are called to be a people who offer healing in all the spaces and places of discord, conflict, and disagreement in the world around us. We have a big job. And yet, how graced we are as a people and as a community to be called and sent.